Welcome back, everybody. Great to have you online again, hopefully, and to the second panel of this year's Swiss Coffee Trade Association virtual conference event, taking place over 2 days and with 4 panels. And as I said, this is the second panel discussion of today, and there are 2 more tomorrow. So please keep checking the SCTA app for updates and more information about the overall agenda of the conference. Those of you who are tuned in for the first panel today, you'll have heard that we were discussing the overall theme of the conference this year, Together Toward Tomorrow. And we've broken each day up, in fact, into a panel in the beginning part of the day, which is focused on together, and especially in the context of this rather unusual and exceptional year. And the second event of each day is themed around tomorrow. And so what better opportunity for us to get into this topic of the coffee industry tomorrow than to invite the next generation to talk to us about their experiences of this year and looking forward to the future and the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead in the coffee sector. So to do so, we brought together a panel representing, if you want, the value chain in the coffee sector and also the representation of the Swiss Coffee Trade Association Next Gen Council. That's Doreen van Doen. But we also have Daniel Montenegro, who's we're going to represent the producing side, a manager at Exportadora Internacional Dinamica, and part of the Next Gen Origins. Some of you may remember that we had the opportunity to host the Next Gen Origins in Basel last year. We have Giacomo Celli, who's the Sustainability Director at Mercom Coffee Group, and we have Teda Fietz, Senior Purchaser at Chibo. So as I said before, we have also Doreen joining from the Swiss Coffee Trade Association. Welcome to all of you. Great to have you with us. Excited to see what you're going to share with us today in the context of the exciting, if sometimes challenging future facing the coffee industry. But before we get into that, I think we wanted to take a moment just to sort of reflect a little bit on the past and sort of some of the things that happened over the last years. And to do so, I think Doreen, the Swiss Coffee Trade Association Next Gen Council, is going to share with us a little video to break the ice and get us into the topic. So, Doreen, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you, Dean, and hi to all. Really excited to be here today with you on this International Coffee Day. So with Next Gen, we prepared a video looping back. It's a time lapse, in fact, of the past 30 years and looking back on the origins. So yeah, let's first dive into this and comment a bit afterwards. So you saw a lot of changes and shifts over the past 30 years. And in addition to that, for sure, early 2020, our coffee community was impacted and is still impacted by another challenge, which is COVID-19, adding extra pressure on economic, social, and environmental level. So yeah, we risk even more to lose the origin and flavor diversity and some amazing coffee people in our sector. So there's really a need to foster stable and sustainable supply chains that make sense in today's challenging environment. So that's a kickoff starter. And yeah, let's now further kick off.
It'll be fascinating to hear from you how you think that model and those patterns are going to change further in the coming 30 years, Doreen. But before we get into some of those broader topics, maybe I could just stick with you, if I may, first as a sort of host, really, the SCTA Next Gen, giving us the opportunity to have this discussion with our panelists. I suppose, one of the things that may interest those people who are joining us is whether we think that the next generation of professionals in our industry is even more concerned about some of the big global challenges that we've been discussing at the SCTA conference over a number of years. We've talked about climate change, we've talked about origin concentration, we've talked about sustainability. Do you think that there's an expectation from your generation and from the sort of next gen in the sector that business must create a radically better future?
Well, in fact, Dean and all, there has been a survey recently. So a global survey was run with 27,000 Gen Z people around the world. And Generation Z is a generation starting from the early 1990s up until the early 2010s. And in fact, that study, so it's fact-based, came to many conclusions. And the first conclusion was that this generation, the next gen, in fact, is really more conscious, tech savvy, and activist. So they really value values and purpose, and they call upon brands for co-creation, for leading the way, also to their employers, by the way. They value authenticity. They are really known to be sustainable entrepreneurs, if you want. But in my personal view, if I may add, we really cannot forget the other generation, because the next gen doesn't know it all. So there's still a past, and we can learn from the other generation, and go hand in hand towards the future, because what the next gen does not have built up yet is so much experience. So it's best to learn from each other, and to go forward.
Yeah, great. And you raised there's a couple of points I want to pick up on as I come to Teda next, but just one reminder that when we talk about tech savvy, just for everyone who's joining the event, also I've been advised that the best way to get the most out of this year's conference on the technology side is to use the Chrome the Chrome browser is the best way to access the technology that we're using to host the event. So those of you who are on a different browser, you may want to switch, and it may improve the quality of the sound. So thanks for that, Doreen. But you know, this we see lots of those studies around Gen Z and the kind of statement and declaration of interest in sustainability and authenticity. Ted, if I could come to you, in terms of what you see in consumption patterns, do you see some noticeable changes in the recent years, and what is your organization planning and expecting for the future? Do you see these trends reflected in consumption patterns?
Yes, definitely we see this. So the main drivers in the past for a consumer to buy a product were price and quality mainly. And nowadays it's still price and quality, but sustainability is getting more and more important for them as well. I would say in Germany, about 30% consume sustainable coffee on a regular basis, while 10 years ago, there were rather 20% that consume sustainable coffees. So there's definitely the trend, which we also see there. And in my opinion, it's only a matter of time when sustainable coffee is a matter of course for a consumer. So it's not only an additional benefit anymore, but it's a matter of course.
Yeah, and so in terms of how you plan with that, so I mean, as the next generational wave comes through, and I think we had discussions at the SCTA conference last year about the role of Germany and the German consumer and the next generation of consuming also in a slightly different way. You know, what's important for you in sort of strategic planning and thinking about how you run the business successfully with these sort of changes that are coming?
I mean, we also want to increase the quantity of sustainable coffees we have, but therefore we need several key elements, like we need reliable suppliers, we need long-term supply chains, because without that it's not possible. And two very important points are also, of course, buying good coffee quality, which also includes food security, and having traceable supply chains with our suppliers.
Yeah, and I think and before I come to you, I really want to work upstream, really. So I'm starting here with the consumer, which I think really good place to start and find out what's expected and how do we plan for those different changes in consumer demand and consumption patterns. I should also plug the fact that we've got a panel of 1 hour, so I do want to give everyone who's tuned in the opportunity to ask questions. You can do that using the app, and so just fire your questions at us, and then I can direct them to our panelists as we go through. But maybe picking up, if I may, Giacomo, picking up on the points that Teda was making, what can the trade and the intermediaries do? What role can they play in getting the stability of long-term supplies of high quality and, as we hear, sustainable raw materials, sustainable coffee, to satisfy the needs of this next generation of German consumers in that case?
Thanks, Dean. Well, in my answer, I will talk about value, and in the term value here is really related to what is important, so what we call a material topic. So in my opinion, in the future, trade will be more and more connected to building this value in the supply chain through integration farmers to roasters, as we've heard from Teda. So in the future, I don't see added value in short-term transactions if these are not connected also to long-term value. And the value that roasters recognize is the reduction in risks of quality, diversity, increasing reliability and resilience of their supply chains, obviously on top of price. And we know that volatility, climate change are challenges. So to guarantee really this value behind the short-term transaction, really we need to invest long-term in the upstream supply chain, and particularly technical assistance and education. And if I may, there's really a sentence that strikes here, and was as old as 1964, being told by Malcolm X, who says education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to the people who prepare for it today. So this is the today, but tomorrow is because of today.
Very nice, Giacomo. Thank you for that. I think that's a really interesting theme that we were not really able to talk properly about tomorrow unless we understand what we need to do today. And indeed, also maybe if I go back to Doreen's film, learning a little bit about what happened in the past and how we got to where we are today. So if that brings me to you, Daniel, and I think just from the producer perspective, how would you describe? We saw the origin volatility in Doreen's graphics there. How would you describe the way that coffee production has changed in the past year? Based on that and where we are today, what are your thoughts about where that's heading in the next 10 years?
All right. Thank you, Dean. Well, I mean, coffee has existed ever since the 15th century, and the world has changed ever since, and the world changes every year. That graphics, the video is amazing. Is an amazing way how to see and if you analyze every country and every producing country, there's different factors that have affected, and this is either cultural changes, climate changes within the country, even governmental changes that make the producing country get affected. So, and if you ask me like what has happened in the past 10 years, the most important things or impactful events that I've seen in the past 10 years for producers are rust, are an increase in interest in quality, and also there's no secret that there has been an economic crisis for the past 5 years. And there's been good times and bad times over in the coffee industry. But what we've seen through these years is that producers learn to adapt, learn to become more efficient, and they become resilient. And moving forward, the pandemic is something that the working generation hasn't ever seen, and we're currently learning how to work with it. It was a big impact. It was a dramatic impact. It was a shock for everyone. The supply chain was affected. I was actually living in Madrid and had to move back here to Guatemala to attend the emergency. And we're currently learning and evolving through it. And so the next couple of years is going to look very interesting. And all I can say is, what else than actually attending a worldwide webinar in which we can virtually be in Switzerland or attending the SCTA, while a lot of producers don't really have the access to do this. So the next 10 years are going to be focused on technology and education. So I agree with Giacomo as well.
Yeah, No, those are important points. Let's come back to those themes around technology and education in a moment. But we also do read some quite gloomy and depressing news articles about producers. Reading some of those in Central America who just in the end have had enough. I mean, the resilience, they got to a point where the resilience is being stretched too far. So how should we see a future in coffee production? I mean, what are the different elements of the coffee production, and what hope and opportunities can you see from your perspective, Daniel?
What are the hopes? Okay. There was an interesting conversation with my group of the next generation producers, and this group consists and producers and they're leaders from co-ops and associations, and these leaders are from Peru, from Colombia, from Honduras, Nicaragua, and myself from Guatemala as well. And we all agreed that it's been a hurdle. It's been a difficult time for our generation. However, it's not only about resilience, it's also about growing in this industry. As a young child, you grow up learning about this, and you learn that farming involves a lot of risk and involves a lot of adaptation. We all agreed that we do see a future in coffee production. Coffee is one of the biggest traded commodities worldwide, and we need to adapt to the fourth industrial revolution.
Yeah, I'd like to go back in a moment. I've got this interesting. There's already some very nice questions coming through from our audience, which I'd love to give. I think the whole point is to give those opportunity, people who are asking questions, to fire them at you. But I'll come back in a moment, Dan, if I may, just to sort of break that answer down a little bit into the different parts of the chain in terms of the milling and the farming and the sort of the pressures and the challenges on access to labor, especially. Which we know is an issue. But here, maybe Giacomo, I could come to you first on this, which is a question from our audience. What do we think about the use of technology for developing further this integration of producers into the chain, into the overall chain? And I don't know whether you're in your organization, in Mercon, you have some examples you might be able to share, or what you're thinking about this need to use more technology in the upstream coffee production.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, technology and innovation is the key to keep an industry evolving, right? But the big hurdle here is there's an economic crisis. Two, there's a major factor that we need investment, right? And to make investment, there needs to be an economic investment and global cooperation to understand really where are we going to invest and where our producers are going to have the biggest return of investment.
Yeah.
There's thousands of agricultural technologies out there, and I'm going to give you an example, Gene. One is we're actually studying and we're working with a couple of companies in our end in Guatemala to experience with aerial drones. And why is this important? Is because now aerial drones, you can measure temperatures, you can measure sensors, you can do aerial images through the use of GPS technology, right? But it helps us even study on the micro regions within a farm on how and where to plant specialty and commercial varietals.
Interesting. So that technology is giving us a greater level of, let's say, precision and efficiency. I want to just get some answers from some others as well, Dan. Just so I'm going to come back to you on a couple of points that you raised. But Giacomo, just from Mercon's point of view, how are you seeing the use of the application of these new technologies to integrate more of the producers?
Yeah, so digitalization in the future in supply chains will play a key role, and this is mainly connected to an efficient and transparent sharing of data that is functional to leverage and build even more trust in between all actors in the supply chain, and ultimately to understand each other better. So I think these digital tools that Daniel is talking about, they really need to be relevant in order to build a better world for farmers. That's, as Daniel's saying, increasing their yields, improve their quality. There's a lot to do on farm business management. But as I say, this is also very important to improve business partnerships that then are based more on an underlying flow of qualitative and quantitative insights that needs to drive consumers' engagement.
Yeah.
And as Mercon, we do really believe in that. We're very active. Our farmers into our integrated origins, they are constantly in contact with our technicians, and then we also drive all these data and insights to our clients. So we act as really facilitator in this digital data flow.
Yeah, that's interesting, Giacomo. And again, I think it's a theme which we must explore a little bit more, which is when we say the word facilitator, how can that become maybe a bit more proactive? How does the technology change your role and make it a little bit more kind of crucial, both in terms of transparency of data, access to origins? So let's come back to that in a moment, because another question comes through from the audience, which I think could be really interesting, Taylor, to get your view and Chibo's view on this, because we've talked at the SCTA event over a number of years about the risks of the origin concentration, and we saw that a bit in the introductory video. How can we, what do we need to do to get consumers excited about the diversity of origins, so that we don't just end up with a kind of a set of Brazilian and Vietnam blends? Is there anything you're already doing, or do you see any opportunities there?
Yes, of course, we see a lot of opportunities. Obviously, it's a challenge for all of us because Vietnam and Brazil are very dominant and are growing a lot. But for example, what we try to do is that we launch limited editions where we focus, for example, on specific supply chains, and where we try to focus sometimes a specific country. Let's say it's a limited edition from Tanzania, or sometimes we focus more on a specific producer group. So there we want to talk more in detail about the origin. Where does the coffee grow? Who's behind it? What are the cultures in the country, for example? Because we see it kind of as our task to bring the origins close to the consumer, to make them aware what's the diversity that we have in coffee. So there are not only two origins. They're dominant, yes, but we are definitely working on also promoting the other ones.
Yeah, and I think that in order to do that, I suppose that there's going to be a requirement for a higher level of transparency right the way through the supply chain. What are you doing, or how are you working with intermediaries and producer groups to drive that level of transparency and traceability connected to the origins, but more generally in terms of validating sustainability claims, for example?
I mean, for us, it's let's say sometimes it's difficult to have direct contact with producer groups or intermediaries. But one important point for us is to increase the traceability in the supply chains. So not only, let's say, on an export level, but if possible, of course, also to a producer group, for example. We all know that it's not possible to know each individual farmer, and it's also not necessary, in my opinion, but traceability is definitely a very important point we're working on. Mm-hmm. And not only that we want to have this for the communication to the consumer, this is definitely one important point because they are asking for more information, and we want to give it to them. But traceability also plays an important role on other aspects. Just to give you an example, the political pressure we face as an industry is increasing. For example, in Germany, there are discussions about a law for supply chain transparency, and this is still in discussion. But for example, what is already reality is that almost every year we see new regulations on food security. And this is something we cannot solve alone, but this is something we need to solve together with our trading and or our export partners.
Yeah, no, I think I'd like to come back to Giacomo in a second on how the intermediary level in the chain can support you in some of those regulatory requirements and changes. But there's another interesting question that's come through related to this topic from the audience, which is about, it's kind of interesting. It's about really taking a step back and defining what is sustainable coffee now and what is it going to be in the future, because the questioner says that, look, the industry spent a lot of money investing very heavily in labels and certifications in the last 20 years or so. Is that the right path? And I'd like each of you to kind of give your answer on that, or do we have some new ideas? And let's again work back from the consumer. So I might kick it off with you, Teda, then Giacomo, if you could give your thoughts on that, and then Daniel afterwards. Is it going to be more of the same, more labels, more certifications, more compliance, or do we need to be doing things somewhat differently? Teda, how do you see it?
I think that certifications are only one part how we can, I wouldn't say solve, but get closer to the original problems. But I don't think that is the only one that works. We see more and more initiatives from private companies, from industry, from trade. And I think this is definitely necessary because the certifications each certification has its individual topics they are focusing on. And in each country has different issues that we have to tackle. And in my opinion, in the future, it will be necessary that all of us involved in the supply chain have to work together more to be in addition to the certifications that are already available.
Great. And I think, Giacomo, again, it's, in practical terms, what are you doing to kind of stretch into that new role beyond kind of compliance and certification and labels to support the kinds of things that organizations like Chiba would need in the future? And what is sustainable coffee in the future anyway?
Yeah, I mean, if we look at sustainable coffee, there's already a good number of a good track of years in defining what a sustainable farming is about, but we've never really addressed the links between the different elements in the chain. So it's really about not just about a sustainable coffee or exchanging a sustainable coffee, but is the way we exchange. So also the business relationships in the supply chain needs to be sustainable, not just the product needs to be sustainable. Otherwise, it's that just a compliance for the product, but you need to have a compliance on the process in which the product is being exchanged. And I agree with Teda. We need more collaboration. At the end, we are one sector, and also as individual supply chain, we need to realize that we can be as strong as the weakest link in the chain. So we need better collaboration. When I say better collaboration, I mean, again, to the term value that I was referring to before. A better means something that is material, something that makes sense, something that is concretely necessary. So collaboration in the sector and collaboration in the supply chain, so more on a pre-competitive way and at a competitive way, needs to address what is material. And honestly, competition to make a coffee value chain stronger is very healthy. And so if we all start from common foundation and we understand each other better.
Yeah, no, that's really good, really important. There's a couple of other questions coming through, particularly on this, the opportunities of the digital revolution to help us in some of these aspects, which we'll come back to in a moment. But just to conclude that round, I wonder, Daniel, if you could, from your perspective, from the other end of the chain, when we talk about sustainable coffee, is that about ticking boxes and getting seals of certification on sacks and bags of coffee, or does it need to change? Is that working? How do you see the future there?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of certifications out there today in the market, and our point of view as a producer perspective is that it requires a lot of investment to get the certifications done. So it's not only the seal, but it's all the things that we have to get done in order to get certified. And I don't see more producers expanding their portfolio of certifications. I see it more as these organizations improving and twitching every year what went well, what is not going good, what is going great, and adapting each of these standards into different countries, because each country has its own world, and this is what we need to be flexible. It's not really adding more certifications, it's becoming more flexible and understand what is a country's needs. And to just finalize, is the perspective is that also having a huge brand of certifications only will confuse a little bit. It's going to make it more difficult for the final consumer. It's already a lot of investment for roasters and the whole supply chain to teach the consumer about the product, and adding more is just going to become more fuzzy in there.
Yeah. What I like about this virtual format this year is we are actually having also a discussion directly with our participants. So there's some really good comments and feedback coming through on everything that you're saying. And then maybe just to sort of conclude a little bit on this topic of what sustainable coffee is, there's a very provocative question. And will the final consumers really care about any label at all, or will they just know because there's a sort of mandatory regulatory requirement that coffee has to be responsibly sourced? So, is this whole, this phase we're going through of CSR just leading us to an acceleration of a process of acceptability of what we should have from these commodities? Again, Ted, maybe just to start from you, you talked a bit about the German regulatory context. Do you think that that's going to end up in sort of one overall compliance with a regulatory framework?
Well, I'm not sure how fast this entire process will go, but what I'm pretty sure about is that in a few years, sustainability, however we define it, will be a matter of course. And the consumer is not any longer asking for whether the product is UTZ or Rainforest Alliance certified. They would just have a look at it and say, okay, the industry is doing something. I expect this. I expect sustainability as well as I expect good quality, for example. They would not ask for it anymore as a benefit.
Yeah. Giacomo?
Well, a good question. I mean, consumers will also need to be educated, I guess, and it's also a responsibility of each of us and collectively as a sector to educate them about what sustainability is, what really matters for the long-term viability of this industry, and also the same a little bit with the quality, because we are eroding the diversity, and consumers needs to recognize the value of diverse flavors and in order to then be able to support these diversity. So consumers will be part of the process as long as we are able to educate them.
Yeah. Daniel, final word from you on that in terms of how you see that from what we can offer the consumer from farm. Are we offering them? Because I've seen that some brands, it's not so much about, let's say, a compliance or a label. It's about telling human stories, right, about what is happening in the origin. Is that a different form of sustainability, or how do you see that?
Right. I believe that it's a matter of also of creating that human connection, right? It's it's making the consumer understand how and where the product comes from. It's and that requires a lot of education, and it requires a lot of going back and forth, and most important, going through the whole supply chain and working together to make the consumer understand that the commodity is it's a commodity, but it's a product that has its whole process, and it needs not only social certification or any type of certification, but it needs to be mostly understand how is a product made.
Yeah, great. Maybe one last question. Coming back to the point that you've all raised, it's interesting, the sort of theme of technology and education, but making that maybe a bit more practical in terms of the commercial reality. Someone has asked a question is whether or not there's a role for blockchain and digital tools. Do they have a role to play, not just in kind of, let's say, making the whole thing more efficient, but actually in specifically, the question here is specifically transferring premiums back to the producers, and are we going to see, let's say, a more appropriate or a different, let's put it that way, allocation of value because of what blockchain is enabling us to do? Giacomo, maybe first from you, then Daniel and Taylor, to the extent that your organizations are already working that digitalization through, I'd be interested to get your views. Giacomo, you first.
Absolutely. I mean, price transparency is a fundamental component. Without that price security for farmers, we are already creating very weak foundations. We are already testing blockchain, particularly on some supply chains with partners, and with farmers as well. Although with farmers, there's a lot of digital education and connectivity. So there are infrastructural problems that need to be fixed before being capable of really getting them on board on digital platforms as per today. And I think here is where, coming back to the idea of collaboration, this is where the public sector should step in and create that infrastructural that is needed for making these tools.
Understood. I think it's a really important point, because I was actually the whole time listening to this thinking, who is going to pay for all of this? We'll come back to that in a moment as a more general comment. But Daniel, do you see the opportunities of the blockchain technology and these kind of digitally managed supply chains to, let's say, make a difference to the way that premiums that consumers are paying for, let's say, sustainable or quality or differentials to be passed back up the chain to the producers?
Yeah, absolutely. I see blockchain as a huge opportunity, not only for transparency, transparent contracts and transparent through the whole supply chain, but it's also, it creates a different a web of strategic supply chain, right? It creates it connects the customer. It allows you to do synchronized planning. It's intelligent supply. It's smart operations. All this, when you connect it, it's just a beautiful web that works perfectly, right? But it sounds a little bit utopian to just say, okay, blockchain is the solution, and that brings me to the question: is who's going to pay for this, right? Because it involves the entire supply chain, and is the customer really willing to pay a premium for this? Is the producer really willing to invest in this? So it's an important question, and it goes, for me, it goes back in a circle, right? Who is gonna pay for the technology at the end?
Hey, I asked the questions, Daniel, but I'm going to ask you that question in a moment, so I'll come back to it. But because I think I would like us to get into that conversation around the financing of all of this, particularly as in the previous panel discussion, we saw that some of the historical financing houses in the coffee sector are sort of reallocating or reprioritizing their investment areas. So there may be some impact of that. Teda, in terms of digital. Does that help on the consumer interface, or is it more of an internal thing in your supply chain to help you, substantiate your consumer claims and to understand the traceability, transparency, but also the premiums that you want to transfer back up the supply chain? How do you see that?
Well, I think at the moment we're already in the middle of the process that the coffee environment is changing and the trade, because we also see more companies that develop their own platforms, for example. At the moment, I would say from an industry perspective, it's more important to have a platform where you can evaluate all the traceability information from your supply chain. Communicating it to the supplier, to the customer, is getting important, yes, but I don't think the consumer is already ready for it. So some younger generations might be interested, and we also have some QR codes on products where the consumer can see where the coffee comes from. But I think it takes some more time until more coffee consumers are also in the mood and understand how they could tip a coffee farmer, for example. So I think we have to, I would say these are two different topics. So the first is we have to work on traceability platforms for our supply chains. Mobile, or let's say electronic payments, of course important, but I think blockchain is not the only solution for it. I think there are also other good methods like mobile payment, for example.
Yeah, no, I think that is interesting. But let's come back to this point around financing, because in different ways, each of you have listed a number of things that need to happen. I think, Giacomo, you made a really good point about the public sector requirement to finance infrastructure upgrades to allow access to these new technologies, particularly at the producer level. But we also talked a lot about technical assistance, education, investing in the long term. And I think, Daniel, your sort of rhetorical question was, who is going to be paying for that? Is it the consumer? Is it the roaster? Is it the intermediary? Is it the producer themselves? Is it the development agencies, the overseas development agencies? Is it national public sector? Or can we be more creative? Is there a kind of collaborative way that we could co-finance some of these requirements through, the blended capital type structures? Any thoughts, ideas, or experiences? Giacomo, I'm going to start with you because you gave the longest shopping list of things that we all need to pay for. So how are you planning to pay for these needs that we have?
So you listed a number of actors, either connected into the supply chain, but also serving the supply chain, both on the financial side or on the legislative side. So I think here you well said the blend. It's responsibility of everybody to invest. Everybody needs to make his own step, including farmers, because I think what's really important is that ownership is crucial for really believing in what you're doing. So we obviously are here in a supply chain environment, so it comes quite natural to look at the co-investment being done at supply chain level between roaster, traders, and farmers groups, more on and connected that to the commercial transaction. But we obviously should not forget that the fuel that is keeping us going, that is provided by the financial sector, could be also supporting these. For example, as Mercon, we've been pioneering a green deal within our syndicate of banks. which allows us, based on sustainability targets, to receive incentives on our credit lines, and these incentives are to be reinvested into our LIFT program, which is our platform of service to the supply chain. But then we are also extending a hand to the public sector, because we talk to public sector in different in the different origins, but also at European level or in the US. Just highlighting what are the important topics, and I mean, the coffee sector has been brilliant in overcoming the issues on coffee and health in the 90s and early 2000. And I think after coffee and health, there's a coffee and sustainability that should follow the same path.
Yeah, very clear. No, some great to hear about your Green Deal. That's very exciting, Giacomo. Thanks for sharing that with us. Taylor, where's Chibo in terms of thinking about sustainable finance, working with other organizations? I mean, is that something that you're already doing, or you're exploring, or how do you see that panning out?
Of course, companies like ours are always looking for co-funding opportunities, but I also agree with Giacomo that one important thing is that when we build sustainable projects, everybody who's involved in the project needs to contribute somehow. It doesn't need to be a lot, but they need this ownership. But still, I think outside of our coffee sector in general, there's still so much money that we have to ask for. We just have to find the right organizations and companies that join our ideas and our projects.
Great, very good. Daniel, how does that work at origin in a country like Guatemala? Are you seeing already evidence of this sort of co-financing, working with national or local government, but working with the development agencies and with the finance that's available in the chain? Do you have any direct experience of that, or do you see any examples that encourage you?
Yeah, Dean. Unfortunately, as a country, we do not have that much support and as a country financing. So we'd have to move outward to with international investment funds, and we'll build partners through this, long-term partners that supported us to grow. From farmers, we were able to develop a dry milling operation, we were able to build an exporting operation, and this is how we've been leveraging in a healthy financial growth. However, this is not completely. Many producers, I would say 80% of the producers out there do not have access to this type of investment funds, and they're great partners, and they're also in belief of supporting emerging countries and supporting technology out there. And so this is personally for us, this is how we've been able to leverage and invest, make small investments in technological advances.
Yeah, very good. Dorina, I want to come to you now, because I know that what we hear is fascinating and very exciting opportunities for a kind of global collaboration, whether we're looking at financing, whether we're just looking at a linear, increasingly maybe circular value chain, whether we're looking at geographies, whether we're looking, kind of across the sectors. So I just wonder what your thoughts at SCTA Next Gen sort of thinking is on the requirements for more global cooperation, and the degree to which, I mean, it's a little bit of a kind of, in a sense, a sine qua non, but how should it materialize? I mean, how should this global collaboration get kind of maybe accelerated or amplified? How do you see that?
Yeah, first of all, I want to come back to what Giacomo also said. So global collaboration will really be a key success factor. Also, in my day-to-day experience, I work at a green coffee specialist with family values. I experience this on a day-to-day basis. So when the noses are in the same direction, yeah, you go faster. So together you can achieve more. Juntos podemos lograr más, and that's also needed for on global scale. So as already said earlier, we really need to rely on our roots from the past, take what's good, and adapt to today's needs, and move forward together. And the aim, I think, for all of us is to build on a positive impact and coffee legacy, putting the coffee farming community at the forefront. And as you all may know, today's theme of the International Coffee Organization, sorry, the coffee is calling here. So is the coffee is next gen. And as SCTA Next Gen, since early 2019, our aim already has been, we're with a team of 6 people to really connect people we gave webinars, networking, to exchange the knowledge. And also, whilst preparing for this discussion, we discussed also with our co-panelists here and with Next Gen Council, and what we really can do is advocacy. Because we want concrete action, and therefore today we already ask ourselves, and also all of you watching right now, are you really walking the talk? Are you really aiming for long-term sustainable growth, or are you for short-term profits? What about your personal and company values and purpose? So that's already part 1 of our joint advocacy, because it's voicing the views of everyone. And we're still learning, Edine. We're not perfect. It's a process of continuous improvement. We're open. It's called Next Gen, but we're open to the experience of the other generation as well. So.
Thank you for that, Zoe. That's exciting. Let me just, in practical ways, how can people who are listening in, who've been attracted by the title of the panel discussion and the conversation we're having, how can they get involved? What do they need to do to reach out and connect with you and your colleagues to be part of this Next Gen?
Well, first of all, you can mail us. You can join our close LinkedIn group. You can reach out to us personally. Also, I think to the panelists here. Via the app. Yeah, for sure. So connect with either of us. It's still possible today and tomorrow, for sure, for the ones that have a computer and a cell phone, because it's not convenient for everyone to have that. So we need to figure out ways to reach everyone and to not exclude.
Very good. No, I want to come back to that a little bit afterwards, but we're coming close to the end, and there's a couple more interesting questions coming through. I'm going to just warn you. I'm going to ask you all as we wrap up, each one of you, to give a little bit of a sort of the best viewing is something provocative, but let's see how courageous you want to be in terms of a sort of prediction for the next 30 years, or the thing that you would love to see in the next 30 years. Let me put it that way. But we'll come back to that's just to warn you to be thinking about that in the wrap up. But before that, I think there's an interesting question that's come through around storytelling. It's sort of a little bit related. It can be related to sustainability. It can be related just to human contact, to quality, to origin diversity, to all of these different things. And the person asking the question says, look, storytelling is an extremely powerful educational tool. We learn more from stories than we do from our textbooks. But what I like about the question is it kind of matters who's telling the story. So I'd be interested, particularly if it's stories about coffee production and sustainability, I'd be interested, and I'd like to start with you, Daniel, if I may, because I'm personally completely caught up in the story of the work you've been doing with Sustainable Harvest, and David as well, in the whole of the Next Gen Origins, which is so powerful and so full of human stories and experiences. Tell me a bit about your view on getting that story across, and what's the right way to tell the stories of about coffee in your view?
Okay, thank you. Well, I mean, as there is a story, there's storytelling involved from like the producer to the roaster. There's also a storytelling for us from roaster to producer. And as you just mentioned, thank you for mentioning like the sustainable harvest. they've been partners with us for the past I would say five years, and we've been working together. And one of the storytelling we have is the experience that we were able to live last year, and it was a great experience that the whole SCTA next gen producers were able to live. Right, it was I've been able to travel, and I've been able to listen to roasters. I've been able to listen to producers down here in Guatemala, and it's just a matter of the fact of creating that human connection with other producers from other countries was something that I've never lived before, and it was great to spend. It was a 10-15 days that we spent in the whole tour, understanding what were roasters needs, what were the importers needs, what is the market asking for, and what is it really looking into the future. And that just brings me to a little bit of concluding that it's about a lot about it is about people and relationships, right? And we can talk about technology, and we can talk about adapting the operativity, but there's that human connection that we need to create, and that brings the storytelling. And I'm pretty sure that brings the same, likewise, vice versa to the origin. When we've been able to receive a lot of, I would say, hundreds of roasters and importers coming into Origin and learning about what we do and how we do it, and drinking that cup of coffee together.
Yeah, great. That's lovely. Really, very, very nice. And congratulations on the brilliant work that you're doing with Next Gen Origins and Sustainable Harvest with David. Giacomo, storytelling. Who should tell the story? And any thoughts on the powerful way to get these authentic stories about coffee production and origins out into the world?
So I echo what Daniel is saying. It's a vice versa storytelling that's motivational for consumers, and it's motivational for farmers, and to know who's on the other side of the supply chain. I think coffee is a beautiful product. It's so complex, and it tends to attract beautiful people as well. So that means relationships are strong, and most of the times are really sincere. So I think storytelling is to the question that was asked. Storytelling is powerful when it's true, when it's sincere, and otherwise as short legs. So I think we all see the stories that have gone a long way, and the ones that will go a long way in our industry, both on the producer side and on the roaster side. But all those are sincere, true stories.
Great, really good. That's important. It's not necessarily who's telling the story, but it's the level of sincerity and truth that you bring to that. Very briefly, Taylor, on that storytelling. What's the brand doing on storytelling? The Chibo brand. How does that work?
Well, in regards to storytelling, what the consumer is often asking for is, let's say, the voice of the farmer. So they want to know more about where the coffee comes from. What in the future will become also more important is not only the voice of the farmer, but also the voice of the exporter, for example, or of the trader, because they are all involved in the supply chain, and they all contribute to the value chain at the end. I mean, why shouldn't Giacomo also talk about the projects they are doing? So I think we should give the choice to all of them, and the possibility to talk about it.
Very good, thank you. Now I'll stick with you, Ted, if I may, and as we come to the final sort of wrap-up question, what's one big wish, dream, desire, expectation, thinking in 30 years? What do you think? What's on your mind?
My wish would be that we found a solution for a pre-competitive kind of platform, where we can work together on projects and sustainable activities. Because I think at the moment there are many good things running in the countries, but we can achieve many more synergies if we work together and if we talk about it. And
Excellent.
this is not yet happening. So this is my wish.
That's a nice one. That's very good. Daniel, what's on your heart and on your mind for the next 30 years? Are you on mute?
I apologize for that.
No worries.
Yes, I was mute.
Yeah.
I was trying to bring some thoughts from the heart. But yeah, the next 30 years, you know, there's a thought that was taught by my father, and it says in coffee, there's 100 rules, and the important thing is that you learn only one rule or one experience every year, you know. And I wish I could say what's like in my heart and like what the future is in the next 30 years. Well, all I can tell is like if we have leaders in the industry, and if we have people with drive and actually work with the heart, then the industry looks. I'm really excited to work with more leaders in this industry, and it's gonna have ups and downs. That's just how historically it has been, and it's just a matter of building that resilience and working together in a collaborative world, and use globalization in our favor.
Yeah, I like that idea of leadership, more exciting, inspiring leadership in the sector. Giacomo, very quickly from you, 30 years time or over the next 30 years.
30 years time, continue to be focused, be transparent and continue to be transparent and strive for transparency, and be bold. Don't hide behind compliance, but tell the truth. Tell everything that you see and continue to do that. I mean, our industry is on a good path. We need to continue and probably boost a little bit what we are already doing.
Yeah, perfect, Giacomo. Thank you for that. And Doreen, I'm going to hand it back to SCTA Next Gen Council for you to kind of give a concluding remark and maybe also just point towards your hope, expectation, dream for the next 30 years.
Well, in fact, it's very aligned with what Daniel, Giacomo, and Teda already said. So a purpose, value-driven future, co-creation, unification, without being naive, but with the right common sense, and to move forward together and be the bridge and keep on challenging to walk the talk.
Very nice. And I like the way you connect back to our conference theme of moving forward together toward tomorrow. And on that note, two things. I'm going to first of all thank all of you for a really fascinating, rich discussion. Thank you for being part of this and representing the next gen of the industry. I think we can feel excited about the opportunities that lie ahead.